Welcome. My name is Joan Steele, and I am Chair of NACD Chicago Chapter. I'd like to remind everyone that today's program is being recorded. It is with great pleasure that we welcome Eric Artz, CEO of REI Co-op, to our Distinguished Speakers Series. REI, a $3 billion private company, is a specialty outdoor retailer and the nation's largest consumer co-op. It has more than 20 million members and 15,000 employees operating in 41 states and the District of Columbia. As a member-owned co-op, REI is a different kind of company. A purpose-driven brand since its founding 84 years ago, REI leads with its values, placing climate change and racial equities as its top strategic priorities. After 7 years, as CFO and COO, Eric was promoted to REI's president in 2019. He is only the 8th president in their history. Today, we'll hear Eric's call to action for REI and for all of us as directors to redefine business success and make a positive impact on the world. Prior to REI, Eric held executive positions at Urban Outfitters and VF Foods. He is a public company director serving on the board of United Natural Foods and a director of Mountain to Sound Greenway Trust. Our plan today is to have Eric share his bold vision, after which he'll take questions. REI has figured out that a life outdoors is a life well lived. Before we welcome Eric Artz, let's learn more about REI in this short video.
Did you ever wonder if there was a different way to live life? This is the story of 23 people who did. 23 people who found an answer to that question in the mountains. 23 climbing buddies who made a choice to shape their lives around what they loved, which led to a simple idea: to build a business around a life outside. And because they loved mountains more than money, they formed a co-op. So what is a co-op exactly? It starts with you, because a co-op is made up of members, in our case, millions of members. Members who come together for a common cause. Members who are actually owners and have a voice in what we do. Members who share in the co-op's profits and choose to give and get back every year. Because when you spend $1 at REI, you're investing in the outdoors and helping people get outside. Bottom line, a co-op is a business that puts purpose before profits. And more than 7 decades later, we're still proudly a co-op. We're still happily searching the world for the best gear we can find. And we're still in it together, but with slightly more than 23 friends. Most importantly, we're still driven by the belief that it's in the wild, untamed, and natural spaces that we find our best selves. So if you're still wondering if there's a different way to live life, we think there is. Join us.
Well, good morning and thank you. Thanks to Joan Steele for that introduction and for the invitation to speak with you all today. And thanks as well to other members of Chicago NACD Chapter for organizing this event. It is my pleasure to be with you today. As Joan shared, I've had the privilege and the responsibility of serving as president and CEO of REI Co-op since early 2019. And I'm about to enter my 11th year of service to the co-op. And I say privilege because despite the challenges of the last 2 years, I get to wake up every single morning and go to work at my dream job with a wildly passionate and talented group of people. And I often describe my experience at REI as a calling for me. And perhaps you'll understand more of what I mean as we visit together today. I'm responsible for stewarding a nearly 84-year-old outdoor consumer cooperative, a model that on paper should never have been as successful as it has turned out to be into a new era. So today, I'd like to share with you what's on my mind. I have 3 things I'd like to share, And one thing, or perhaps a question, I hope you will take away from today. First, I'll try to answer the question that's probably on each of your minds, which is, what is a co-op and why? Then I'll share how I think about generational responsibility and the idea of collective impact. What that means for a co-op like REI, for me as a leader, and hopefully for all of you. I'll share what I believe we must all raise the standard for how we lead the organizations we serve, because the broad environmental and societal consequences of getting this moment wrong, in my opinion, are existential. And finally, I'll share some tangible examples of how we at REI are trying to raise the standard for our business. But before I go any further with our conversation, I want to recognize that we are coming together and have been doing business for many years on many lands and waters that were forcibly taken from their original inhabitants. We've begun using land acknowledgements more deliberately at REI over the past 2 years as we've deepened our racial equity work. I'm speaking to you as the white CEO of a business in an industry that is built on stolen land. We know that a land acknowledgement alone is not enough and that there is much more work to do and to undo. But we can't move forward until we acknowledge where we are and where we've been. So for me, this means respectfully acknowledging that I am speaking to you while standing on the traditional and now occupied land of the Coast Salish peoples. So thank you. All right, let's talk co-op. Everything that I and REI does starts and ends with the co-op. But again, what does that mean and why does that matter? Well, a co-op is a different type of organization. Our very incorporation requires us to measure our success differently. Co-ops are generally centered on ethical values of honesty, of openness, of social responsibility, and of caring for others. The idea of working together for the common good, not for self-interest. Co-ops are generally formed to meet the collective needs of the members. Membership expects us to adapt to changing needs and threats. And because of the collective positive impact and the positive benefits of being in the co-op, members also expect long-term enduring strategies and value. At REI, we have a quadruple bottom line and measure ourselves by our positive impact on our employees, our members, society, and our business. And our membership expects this of us. Our success as a business is intentionally listed last on that list. Business results, growth, profitability. You heard my background as a CFO. They are all wildly important to us. There is no question. It's the engine that powers everything else we do and what we want to do in the world. So I'd like you to think of our business. I'd like you to think of the co-op as a flywheel. The more we put our purpose and our collective impact work front and center, the stronger our business is. The stronger our business is, the more positive impact we can have. The better both work together, the faster the flywheel spins. Now you might be thinking, but Eric, that's all well and good for you, good for the co-op, but I represent a public corporation. This doesn't apply to me or the expectations of my board colleagues. I'd offer to you that I don't think you need different articles of incorporation to think more like a cooperative, to put people and community first, to put concepts like purpose and collective impact at the very center of your organization's first principles and your missions. I'm speaking to you as the leader of a company that deliberately puts business success as just one of its 4 priorities. Yet we are very successful and profitable from a business perspective. And we distribute the majority of our profits every year to our members, our employees, and the communities that we serve. So by moving the target beyond just financial returns, by embracing a different standard, our business, the co-op, has survived and thrived for 84 years, and we have just recorded another record year. And specifically to our boardroom, my boardroom, if you're wondering about it, I answer to 12 independent board directors. And similar to a public company, new directors are nominated by the board and then elected by our members, as many of you have been elected by your shareholders. And the board governs similar to a public board standard, with perhaps two major differences. No public company red tape, but with an added obligation to operate in the long-term best interest of the members who also happen to be our customers and our employees. So perhaps you can see a little bit into why I consider this my dream job. Now, our members expect an enduring enterprise. As I mentioned, we've been around for 84 years. Membership expects us to be around for 84 more. So my responsibility is to lead us in writing the next chapter for future generations. So allow me to tell you a story to set up this idea of generational obligation and responsibility and how I experienced this idea. In 2019, shortly before I became CEO, I had a breakfast meeting with a community leader about the climate crisis and fundraising. And it was also one of those crazy parental mornings where my wife was going in one direction, I was going in the other, and I ended up having to take our daughter, Chloe, a high school junior at the time, with me to this breakfast. It was a serious conversation. In the middle of it, the community leader turned to Chloe and said, "But you're the future. I am so hopeful because I know your generation is going to save us and fix all this." And I didn't think anything of it in the moment. I thought she was just trying to be nice and inclusive to Chloe. And at the time, I could have seen myself saying the same thing to a young person. You need to know just a little bit about Chloe. Perhaps like her father, a tad bit reserved. She's definitely an old soul. And when this family needs adult supervision, we usually turn to her. And I need quite a bit of that from time to time. Anyway, we go back in the car after breakfast, and I could see Chloe was very irritated and bothered by the conversation. So I asked her, "Sweetie, what's wrong? What's bothering you?" I just assumed it was Instagram and TikTok. And Chloe said, "I don't like what she said." And I'm like, "Oh, wow. What does she say that bothers you?" "Dad, it's not my responsibility to fix all this. And even if it was, it would be too late." That was a moment for me. That was a wow moment for me on so many different dimensions. And remember, this was before COVID and the current crises. So a 16-year-old calling bullshit on a generation, my generation, a generation that has a significant responsibility in creating this mess, yet somehow feeling empowered to lean back, wash their hands, and then absolve themselves from the responsibility to fix it. So guilty as charged. Every choice that we make as business leaders and as company stewards here and now is creating generational impact. And it's up to us to determine whether that impact is positive or negative. It's also an interesting time to have the opportunity to address a virtual room full of business leaders and corporate directors like yourselves. I have certainly been reflecting that for many decades, we've all been operating against a single business standard, the economic standard. Yes, technically the United States went off the gold standard in 1933, but capitalism has kept the same singular focus, financial returns. And sure, we've all reaped the benefits, the stock market, the valuations, the returns have all grown exponentially. We have businesses that have yet to make a product or a profit valued in the billions. And on the first day of 2022, we saw the creation of the world's first $3 trillion company. The system, the economic standard, no doubt it has worked for some. but not for all and not for the planet. And I think we've started to acknowledge that the system is not working. I commend things like the Business Roundtable for their leadership and proposition that businesses have an obligation to broader societal challenges and impact. Perhaps a recognition that the broader systems of a well-functioning society for all, the idea of a true multiracial democracy, and a healthy natural environment, they're broken. This is not a world that I want to hand to my daughters, to the next generation to fix. I see the moment is now, and the stakes certainly in my lifetime have never been higher. And there are some interesting fact sets that I certainly think about relative to this moment. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the same studies. Societal trust in the government and its institutions, along with media, is at a modern low. Societal trust in businesses and brands and business leaders is at an all-time high. We should all be super appreciative of all that we have done together to earn that trust. But what will we do with this moment, in this moment? Admire it, foster it, to what end? What about leveraging it? What is our legacy? What is our obligation to future generations? For me, for REI, it is not just financials. Is the ecosystem we all created setting us up for long-term success? A healthy planet, a just and equitable society, a world I can be proud of handing off to my daughters? Absolutely not. So it's time to think beyond the economic standard. Imagine a business world in which community, society, and the greater good was the organizing principle, the new standard. And better is something most of us want, no matter red or blue, and we can share the sources of some of this information. 87% of Americans say political polarization is a threat to America. 71% believe American democracy is now threatened. Yet 93% of Americans believe it's important to reduce divisiveness in the United States, with 2/3 saying it is very important. 86% of people believe we can disagree in a healthy way. 72% of Americans say we have more in common than what divides us. So we're a society in crisis and not just a health crisis. The stakes have never been higher for leaders, for our organizations, and for us as human beings. It's January 19th today. This Friday will mark the 2-year anniversary of the CDC confirming the first US COVID case. A few months ago, the FBI released its annual hate crimes statistics report, announcing that people reported more hate crimes in 2020 than any prior year. Hate crimes against people of Asian descent rose 70%. Hate crimes against Black Americans rose 40%. The impacts of climate change have never felt more tangible and omnipresent. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I remember how I felt last summer when the wildfire smoke cleared and we saw for the first time a bare brown peak of Mount Rainier, as we experienced 113 degrees in Seattle for the first time in recorded history. Our employees are exhausted, our supply chains are fracturing, politically we're more divided than ever, and somehow the decision to wear a mask to prevent the spread of a contagious and deadly airborne disease is a political issue. The list goes on, and I'm sorry to say there's no end in sight. So in my lifetime, the call of leadership has never been greater. People are looking for more to trust in this moment, bright lights to follow, anything to help us all push through. We have the trust. And we have a crisis that is now endemic. It's not going away anytime soon. And we will not revert to what was previously known as normal. As leaders, we must transform ourselves and our organizations. And we have to come together in community in the cooperative spirit to find new ways forward. There's nobody else coming to save us. save the day or to solve this crisis. It's me, it's you, it's us, it's the organizations we serve. And our customers and our employees continue to look to us to lead the way. You know, when you first started out in your career, could you have ever imagined facing the number of crises we've seen in recent years, or that people would be looking to us, business leaders, as the bright lights? But either we do something with that trust with this moment, or we lose it. This is a virtual room full of visionary, connected leaders with the power to affect real change. If we choose to lean in, we are the bright lights. So let me tell you what we're doing at REI. We're committed to using every lever we have to make a difference. So we've given ourselves a challenge to transform every single aspect of the co-op by the end of the decade. Our relationship with carbon, our relationship to a white normative and white supremacist society, and our entire business model. By 2030, we won't be just a gear and apparel retailer. We'll be a community, a cooperative in the truest sense of the word. And we'll have tripled our business, more than doubled our membership, halved our carbon footprint, and our membership will reflect the diversity of the communities we serve. Today, we have more than 20 million members and 15,000 employees. Going forward, membership in this community, not a tent, not a pair of boots, albeit they're still very important, is the core product of the co-op, membership in this community. By 2030, we'll be a community of 50 million members, engaged in the fight for life outside. That's 1 in 6 Americans. It's audacious, yes, but we believe it's achievable. And the voices of 1 in 6 Americans start to tip the scales. We're going to decouple our business growth from our carbon footprint. We're climate neutral as of January 1st, 2021. In other words, anything you buy at REI has been offset by carbon credits, which means we're holding ourselves financially accountable for each unit of carbon we emit in our own operations today. At the same time, we'll draw down our carbon footprint by 55% by 2030, in line with IPCC guidelines. We're leaning into our re-commerce business, used gear and apparel, which eliminates about 50% of the carbon footprint for each used item sold. And we're reimagining how we think about our supply chain, knowing that the vast majority of our carbon footprint comes from making and selling new products. Last year, we launched the REI Cooperative Action Fund, a public charity supporting organizations that promote justice, equity, and belonging in the outdoors. Organizations like the Friends of Big Marsh, focused on the 297 acres of Big Marsh and the surrounding Southeast Chicago communities, with the goal of making the area a destination for people to connect to nature and the outdoors. Or Latino Outdoors, inspiring, connecting, and engaging Latino communities in the outdoors, ensuring Latino history, heritage, and leadership are valued and represented as part of the outdoor narrative. We have and we will continue to raise our voice for voting rights, and we support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And we will continue to close our doors on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year, paying our employees to go outside. It is the day when we speak loudest about what we care most about. We are far from perfect, but this work is hard. And we have a hell of a lot of it to do over the next eight years and beyond to achieve our goals. So I'm 3 decades into my career, and perhaps in another time or place, I'd be thinking about lining things up to be comfortable in retirement. Instead, I'm thinking about my daughters. I'm thinking about the fact that after 30 plus years of work, this is the single most impactful leadership moment of my career. This is my conviction, and I see it as my responsibility. And I'm not going alone. I have a leadership team made up of brilliant minds who I know feel the same gravity that I feel in this moment. And I work for a company filled with employees who embody our mission, who wake up every day because they want to make an impact. They want to know that their work means something, and they want to make a difference. And I have a board that is highly engaged in the journey, and has helped us all to raise the ceiling on our collective courage and risk appetite to go build what we all see and what we all know we need. So what's next? I think it's time to elevate our understanding of what it means to achieve business success, a new definition of success, a new standard. And you already know that if you want to be around for future generations, if you want to drive the change, you need to be relevant. You need to be customer focused. Well, what are customers at the end of the day? They're humans, and fundamentally humans want connection. So customer centricity is really human centricity. People's lives don't start and stop when they walk through the doors of our business. If we wish to stay relevant, to grow and thrive, we have to put society, humans, at the center of all we do. We have to engage them, build a relationship, be in a relationship with them, and like a cooperative, we have to act in the best interest of their collective needs. So I hope you leave here today thinking about the following questions. In this new normal, and in the 84 years to come, what does success really look like for you and your organization? If you were to shove the economic standard out of the way, and again, don't throw it out totally, just push it slightly off center, what new standard would you put in its place? And with that new standard, what could your generational impact have the potential to become? So thanks for allowing me to share what is keeping me up at night. I hope that today's discussion will cause many more restless nights for you as well. I am hopeful. I know and see it time and time again that we all go further together. We might be in crisis, but the opportunity of this moment is inspiring and incredibly energizing. I would not want to be anywhere else at any other time. History has taught us time and again that the bold and the innovative prevail in these moments. Let's be the bright lights and all step boldly into this moment. Future generations are counting on us to get it fixed and to get it right. Thank you again for your time together today.
Thank you, Eric, for that very courageous view of how business can positively impact future generations, and for decisions to focus on the common good rather than prioritizing financial returns. It's truly inspirational. So let's move to Q&A. I'm going to ask everyone to please use chat only to post questions. And REI has graciously agreed to address any questions that we're unable to get to in today's session. So Eric, I'd like to start. Do you think companies are ready to include social justice issues in their strategic priorities? And what specific advice would you give board directors about how they can help companies advance on this issue?
Well, thanks, Joan. And again, thanks for having me. I would hope so. I don't know that I have great insight into whether or not they're ready. I will share with you, I think, an entry point for boards on this topic, like many things that we do, is risk. I think, as we all serve on boards, many times we boil our service down to two very simple imperatives: hire and manage the right CEO, and then risk management. So I guess I'm always looking for entry points in those rooms to these conversations. And I can't imagine in this societal labor war, labor moment, so many things going on, from a race and equity, education, on and on, environmental justice, how race, equity, and belonging for an organization won't be in your top 10 ERM list. So, if that's the entry point, then, what I would just offer is that which gets measured gets done. And defining success, accountability is critical, frankly, to any strategic initiative, especially this topic. I think including compensation, that's very important as well. And there's no question that this journey, I believe, starts at the top, and the CEO is a very critical, leader in this change effort. You ask about boards a little bit, Joan. Just one more thing, if I'll share it, and perhaps it's helpful. At REI, when we talk about our race and equity work and the journey that we're on, we use a phrase, working from the inside out. And what that means is beginning with self, then team, then organization, then customer, then society. And many times you'll hear me say to myself or to my team or to the organization, remember, do your work, which means your personal education, your bias training, your listening, really, trying to explore your lived experiences and, more importantly, other people's lived experiences. Well, that also applies to the board. And several of our board members spoke up early in our journey and said, look, we have to participate just as the organization is. So the board has voluntarily taken on their personal education journey, committed in-session board meeting time, significant time to do their work. Again, bias training, cultural assessment, speakers, readings, discussion on it. And guess what? In our recent August meeting, I say recent, I guess it's a little while ago, but in our August meeting of this past year, I remember several of our board members just kind of sitting back in their chair and saying, all this diversity and equity work, it's making all of our conversations better. So, I think the boards being able to do their work from the inside out, partner with management on the journey is really important.
Thank you for that. I have one other question. REI has significantly reduced its carbon footprint, as you discussed, and has set new and ambitious goals for further reductions. Can every business reduce their carbon footprint? And if so, what role does the board play in helping them achieve this?
I would hope so, and I would argue yes. All companies should be able to. Maybe one of the things I'd reflect on, Joan, this goes back in my career, as some of the sustainability work was emerging, I think we had an ignorant bias. I certainly had an ignorant bias that it just cost more. And fast forward to a lot of learning and a lot of experience. One of the things I've learned is that better outcomes for planet and community happen through more innovative solutions with real financial returns. And I'll give you two examples. Maybe 5-6 years ago, we opened what was going to be our third distribution center. And in the moment, based upon everything we're trying to achieve, we gave that team a challenge. We asked them to do something from a sustainability perspective that was never done before anywhere in the world, as far as we could tell. They convened all the players, the developers, the builders, these design charrettes, sustainability charrettes. They built a 600,000 highly automated center that is net zero, LEED platinum, and now zero waste to landfill, and have already paid the cash back and then some. And it started with a simple challenge: innovate in service to better environmental outcomes and a better employee experience. And they achieved it, and they were excited by it, and they were empowered by it. You mentioned some of the things we're doing, like used gear and the re-commerce model. Let's all just think about, I think about this supply chain crisis, the labor, the container shortages, things stuck in Suez Canal, everyone flying product, people buying planes. Here's what I know, or at least I believe. If we were to scoop up all the outdoor gear in your closets, in my closet, that's not being used, in boxes and wherever else, I believe all the gear that we need today to service all that demand already exists in the world. And if we made that choice, if we were able to connect those consumers and do it in an easy way, we would eliminate 50% of the carbon footprint as compared to new products with virgin materials. So you can see where I'm going. Boy, what an interesting, innovative opportunity. It is really hard. We're on the journey. I really wish I had all that capability today. But again, a path to innovate and deliver better customer outcomes. The last thing I would say, Joan, is, relative to boards and managing this, again, I give our board credit. We had a couple people, raise their hands and say, well, wait a minute, you're going to re-up on these 2030 commitments. Let's recognize as a board and leadership team that these commitments from a reputational perspective will certainly survive multiple administrations of leadership in the board. And this is really a capital allocation question. So we went through a process with our board, created this comprehensive board resolution. I smile a little bit because our board's commented on, it was the longest, most comprehensive, elegant board resolution they ever approved. And I think, why am I going down that path? Because I think that long-term commitment was really important. But I think the honesty of the board staring at capital allocation, what that fundamentally said was climate change in our business, and from what we see, what we believe we're empowered to do, is the #1 priority. So first dollar out has to go to sustainable work and sustainable types of projects and innovation. One last thing is we delegated that work then down into the A&F committee, and I think that's worked well for us. Again, it's a committee that does a lot of good work on controls and inputs and outputs. Here's another one of those things. How much carbon are we emitting? What are the capabilities? What are the costs? And we report on that now every quarter.
That's great. Thank you. Eric, I think it's time that we're going to turn to the audience for questions, and I'd like to welcome our chapter board director, Holly Van Derzen, to moderate the questions.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you, Eric, for those stimulating comments. We have a couple of questions in the chat string that are related to comments you've already made and are in fact related to each other. It sounds like you are already looking at the Global 2030 Agenda, and that probably means you're looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. If that is the case, which of the 17 SDGs seem to be in your wheelhouse? So these are the Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not familiar with that, perhaps you could just speak to within the sustainability arena, which parts of sustainability are most important to you. And then the second piece, you made the comment that what gets measured gets done. How are you starting discussions about aligning your climate goals with executive compensation?
Let me take the last one. I just had a comp committee meeting this morning, and we added ESGs to our executive compensation. We're stepping into it. Probably shouldn't even say that because I better tell my team before I tell all of you, but give me a little bit of grace on that. So it's a hot topic, and I think it's really important, and we're instituting that for 2022, and we're really looking to progress it. I think what was interesting about, again, just trying to share perspective, hopefully helpful to other board members as well.
Get lost last night.
Our board.
I can't explain it.
Oh, a little bit of interference there.
Yes.
Our board really, and we are thinking hard about the unintended consequences. Quotas when it comes to the social side, or targets when it comes to the climate side, being very careful that we have things that we can measure, we can articulate, we can audit, and that our eyes are wide open for unintended consequences. So it's just interesting where most of the conversation in our committee meeting went today. Holly, give me a hint again. Take me back to your first part of your question.
Yeah, the question that's in the chat box really links to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which has 17 categories in it that some companies have chosen to look at which of those 17 SDGs link most closely to their business purpose and strategy, and have lifted any out. So the question really is, have you lifted any out, or are you out of those 17 goals? Are you really looking more broadly at what makes sense to us?
I'll invite my team, when we put some of these answers in print, to come back and give the real answer. I'll give my general understanding of it. We have certainly thought about scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions as being our target. We understand in our business, and have for many years, where we're emitting. We joined a climate neutral organization. We've gone through some auditing to make sure we're looking at it the right way. And we're now switching into a phase which really starts to get at unearthing solutions. And I would just confess, from a leader perspective, a board perspective, there's a lot of commitments out there. But but the amount of work that needs to occur across our supply chains is very daunting. And in our industry, there's a few large companies and there's a lot of small companies. And the sustainability journey is as difficult for the small as it is the large, especially as a general merchant like ourselves when we sell other people's products. So I would just confess that, we're very interested and very engaged from a multi-sector perspective, because I think, it's going to take government, it's going to take policy, it's going to take multi-sector, it's going to take within sector, it's going to take within your business. All of those things have to work, I think, to achieve the significant, reductions. Again, our overall, perhaps to the question, our overall target is the 55% guidance from the IPCC. But maybe I'll stop there and we'll put an official answer back to the team that gets more at those guidelines and ties it to what we're doing.
That's great, Eric. And it looks like there's a lot of interest in this whole sustainability question. So the next one comes from the same general domain. And that is when you're looking at sustainability with your board, do you look at educating your entire board and have discussions on collective actions with your entire board? Or do you defer to specialists or to a particular committee within your board? And then same question at the NEO level, your non-executive officers. Do you have, is it across your leadership team, or is there a specific subset of your leadership team?
Yeah, maybe Holly, I'll take it a little bit to the theory of change for an initiative like this. I think in general, when something in the order of magnitude of this begins, as business leaders, we generally, go hire the specialists, create a discrete team with the skills. They start to educate and populate the organization and inoculate, cross-pollinate the organization with knowledge. And then eventually you start to transition to a point where these concepts and the ideas begin to embed themselves in the very strategies and the very essence of who you are and what you do. We think a lot about that continuum. We've been at this for 20 years, maybe, not quite, 14 years. So we've gone through a fair amount of that change. I wouldn't say we have a climate specialist on our board, nor did it begin that way back in the early days, but we have a number of board members that have experience from a business context of what this means and what the obligations should or could be for REI. And then within the organization, I think we've all, again, kind of back to the same idea I talked about on diversity, working from the inside out. I think real understanding, the landscape and the education for me, for our team, has been significant. So we have a very talented team of specialists that help us internally. And what I appreciate more than anything about that group is they have a real business customer bias to how they think about things. So it's not, I'm trying to say, like, there's a lot of technical, deep technical work to be done, and you need that expertise, but to translate it and manage that continuum embedded in everything you do, I feel like that's when we're going to see a different level of kind of engagement, empowerment across every stitch of our organization. And that's what we're in the process of working through.
That's really useful, Eric. And I guess this next one sort of now looks outside REI. And you obviously have some very strong views on things that need to change within REI, but in the corporate world in more general. Are you working with CEOs of other companies, regardless of industry, to collectively share ideas about what you're doing for change? And this question is not specific to ESG. So I think you could probably look at this for other topics as well, racial equity, et cetera. Are you working with other CEOs to collectively share ideas and get the message out for how to be successful collectively?
We are, and it kind of gets back to just, I think business leaders in general, going through all of this crisis, I feel like people have done great work together, and I have leaned into so many people. If anybody's listening or ever hears this, I mean, all of our networks went on went on steroids going through this. I don't know if that's a bad term, but we reached out to everybody. How are you doing this? And I'll be honest with you, Holly, a lot of times it was more personal. How are you doing? Like, are you feeling as crazy as I'm feeling in this moment? We all come back here to the new year, and here's Omicron and another kind of challenge for us. So the phones light up, and we compare notes, methods. How are you handling this with your boards? And there are, when I talk about being inspired in the moment, I do some things with a group of CEOs around race and equity, and other things in the industry as well. They're not formal organizations, but they are very focused on a lot of what I shared today, which is, are we kind of all, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. What are you all thinking? And boy, there are common threads across sector. And I would share with you that in most of those groups, I am not sitting with outdoor brands or outdoor industry. It's very much, outside of our normal circles. And I find it fascinating and energizing. So I think, kind of back to my moment and perhaps the challenge that I carry today, I think really levering up on those. I think we're going to find goodness by expanding our community and engaging with people that perhaps in the past we just didn't bump into that much. In other words, we're going to solve more of our climate problems in our supply chain if we look outside our industry than if we just keep staring at ourselves.
Well, that's fantastic. And, we kind of went one direction looking at outside REI. The next question goes the opposite direction. And that is, how are you trying to harness the power of your members in achieving your goals?
Well, you heard me talk a bit about membership and membership being the center of our work. So maybe I'll just leave it with, come back to me and talk to me in about 6 months. And after we've done some things and launched some work that we have in flight. And my hope would be that you will be able to hold me accountable and say, as a member, I like what I see. If I think about where you talked about going and what I just experienced as a member of the co-op, this is where we should be. Keep doing more of this.
Okay. This next one, Eric, I think is related to the questions that you've just answered. So, if you feel you've covered it, then we'll move on to the next one. But the comment is that REI has a compelling universal purpose supported by a distinctive strategy and operating model. How does REI increase recognition beyond outdoor industry, current members, customers, and employees? So we've talked a little bit about your colleagues, but is there anything else that comes to your mind that you're doing on helping outside stakeholders understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why it might be of use for them to consider things of this type?
Yeah, Holly, pretty much everything we do, we open source. So, I shared with Joan that idea, that third DC. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's a staggering number of distribution professionals that came and were welcomed into our location there in Arizona to see and understand what we did. We are equally hungry to go see and visit other people and where they're innovating and seeing success. So doing something like today, as you would expect, we have a lot going on as business leaders. So going through the crisis, I haven't done much outside work, but I do feel like, certainly when Joan reached out, that an organization like NACD, who I belong to as well, as board leaders, we're all thinking about things. So I kind of welcome even this opportunity just to take some time and share how we think about things and perhaps stimulate some thought in some uncomfortable evenings.
Okay, it looks like maybe one more question, and then I'm going to turn it back to Joan. And And I'm going to take a very different topic for this, since you've been grilled a bit on sustainability here at ESG. What excites you about REI's new product innovations and partnerships, and how important is technology in what you do?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, we need another hour. Oh, well, technology, data, AI, machine learning, it's almost like the classical like strategy frame where you have your core business, you have adjacencies, and you have transformation. It feels to me like in a legacy business like ours, there's a data technology through line that goes through that. And the more that we become more digitally engaged, savvy, the closer or the better we get at things like personalization, the more the world opens up to us in terms of what we want to do from a business perspective, but also how we want to engage that community in the fight for life outdoors. So we have gone through a process with our board over this past year relative to those 2030 goals, our 3-year strategic plan, and we are investing a historical amount of infrastructure and capability to build and modernize the capability of the organization, again, across that broad spectrum. I will share one, Holly, there's one thing in the back of my mind, and I'm just going to share this again if it's helpful for board members. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about machine learning and AI, and I think we're all thinking about social media and those algorithms. And it was interesting as they talked about the reality that machines are patterning after what we are doing. They're trying to repeat the behavior that we demonstrate. And what that made me think about in the context of board leadership and my role is we all get wound up about machine learning and AI and efficiency and so on. But kind of back to the premise of a number of things that I shared today, I certainly think now about that made me think more about, and to what end? If the machine is patterning after something we don't like or fulfilling, again, a standard that we're trying to change, how do we work with data? How do we work with technology to be an accelerant to the journey that we're on, and not a tool of regression or a tool of just what we're capable of doing or seeing today? So I think in the boardroom I've certainly felt like we spent a lot of time on the data side, with privacy and so on, but sure feels like even in our business, there's other conversations that we need to continue to think about on this journey.
Well, that's great, Eric. Thank you so much for letting our members engage with you on their interests. And with that, Joan, I'll turn it back over to you for a final question and closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Eric, I'm interested in how you developed your passion for this new kind of business ethics.
I don't know. Well, I guess what I would share, Joan, is I stumble a little bit because this is, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, in the coal region of Pennsylvania. So perhaps my early days might on the surface look uncommon, but my father was a teacher, my mother was a nurse. It was a community with strong values, a commitment to community, coming off the backside of the Second World War and this idea of generational impact. I would say that's probably in my DNA, Joan. But then I've been the product of great experiences, great people, great mentors. The military had an influence on me, significant influence. I spent more than half a dozen years, my wife and I, overseas, both in Asia and Europe. I had the privilege to work there, and it's just interesting to look back in your home country and experience America from a different perspective. Again, I've had, interesting mentors, became a husband, became a father. And then I bumped into this thing called REI, this beautiful thing, relative to where it was and perhaps what we need in this moment. And I don't have a great answer to your question, Joan, but what I would say from a team perspective, I shared a little bit of that at the end. I won't want to be at any other place doing any other thing. And I think the team that we've assembled believes we're here for a reason. I think we're together for a moment. And as I shared, we're terribly inspired and energized by the work ahead, as hard as it might seem some days.
Well, thank you, Eric. And on behalf of all of us, again, we want to thank you. You're doing something very big, very special in redefining business success and corporate ethics. And this stands out as one of our most provocative and inspiring CEO conversations in our Distinguished Speakers series. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank Holly for her skillful moderation and for our audience for the very, very thoughtful questions. I'd also like to remind everyone that member feedback is important, and we'd appreciate your completing a brief survey on today's program that's posted in your chat box. Our programs are the result of the collaborative efforts of our chapter sponsors and board directors. We are grateful for the support of Accenture, Sidley Austin, Houlihan Lokey, KPMG, Perlmeyer, Financial Profiles, Protiviti, Marie Norman, and Onboard. And we are also delighted to welcome our newest sponsor, Zurich American Insurance. Please join us for our next program on February 22nd as leading board directors and experts discuss the new state of M&A. This concludes today's program. Thank you for your participation and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, again.